All right. Thank you for taking your time to meet with us today. We're happy to go through the Question Builder tool with you and teach you a little bit about the different types of math questions that you can create. And those of you who are familiar with Question Builder, we're excited to show you some of the new tools and features that we've come out with. I'm Kristen. I work on the training and support team. Today I have Hallie Hurwitz over here with me. She is our Question Builder product manager. And I have Chelsea Cook over here with me. She is one of our lead content editors, and she also works with our instructors who use Question Builder to create their own custom questions. So those are wonderful resources to have with us today. And I will just go ahead and get started by giving you all a brief overview of Question Builder. Again, I'm sorry if some of you are more advanced in using this tool. I hope that we'll have some time at the end for you to ask some questions if you do have any. But just keep in mind too that you can always reach out to us directly and we can schedule a one-on-one training with you to go through things a little bit more specifically. But Question Builder is found in your instructor gradebook here on the Assignments tab. Down here on the bottom left, you should see Question Builder. It's below Curriculum. This is not enabled for every gradebook, so just keep in mind if you don't see this here, that you can reach out to us and we will turn it on for you. All right, so when you open up Question Builder, it loads in a second tab here. We ask that you create folders to house your questions within. So if you've created folders already, of course, those will already be here. But to create a new one, just click Create here on the left-hand side of your screen. I recommend naming these folders after like a chapter or a hot lesson. If you're adding questions to a particular lesson, maybe you're creating questions for a certain test. You can name it after Test 1, for example. And then you just click on that folder to build questions within. So you can always view questions in these folders after you create them. You can edit them later. So let's say I want to create a new question. In Test 1 folder, I'll click Create up here. And here I have a few options of the types of questions that I can create. So before I get started, I like to think about what type of answer choices I want for my question. Do I want this to be a multiple choice question, free response, open-ended? We have two types called click to select and click to insert. These are often used for our English courses. They could be used for a math course. It just depends on the type of question that you're creating, but we most often see these first three used in the math courses. So up at the top, you have a toolbar where you can add in images, tables, special characters. We have a variable manager here where you can create multiple iterations of a question. Chelsea, you might be able to answer how many iterations they can add.
You can add 50 iterations per question.
Okay, 50 iterations per question. So you don't have to do this. You can create a static question, just one version, but you can create up to 50 iterations per question. Our expression builder and our graph builder, which is a new exciting tool that we're excited to share with you guys. So then outside of that, you just have your standard formatting options here. Below that, you have your question header. This is optional. You don't have to have a header, but we often see this used for instructions or tables that you want students to have reference to throughout their questions. Maybe if you have a multi-step question and you want this to show at the top for all of the steps, this would be helpful to add in. Below that, you'd add in your question statement. You, of course, have to have this. So you type your question statement in here. If you have any mathematical expressions, you will want to use our expression builder to enter those. We have some of the more commonly used expressions up at the top here. We do use LaTeX, so if you're not as familiar or there's something more advanced that you're trying to do that you're not super familiar with, you can click this link here and it will take you to the LaTeX wiki page. When you're done entering your expression, you would just click OK. And it would enter that statement here for you. So down below, let's say I'm creating a multiple choice question. I am just going to briefly go over this because we had another Question Builder webinar that I will make sure you all have the link to that goes into how to create a multiple choice question in more detail. And of course, you can always reach out to us with more individual questions, but I want to make sure we have time to get into any of the more advanced settings that you guys might be interested in. So we have 4 default multiple choice answers here. You can remove answer choices. You can add in additional answer choices. Pretty much just enter whatever you need here and click correct for the correct answer. You can award partial credit for any that you, maybe for like an unsimplified answer that you'd like to give partial credit for. Our default is to have the multiple choice set as radio buttons where there's one correct answer. However, you can always choose checkboxes if there is more than one correct answer. For each of your incorrect answers, you can have an explain error. So if you know students might make a common error, you could pinpoint that exact error and point them in the right direction. Let's say I want to create a free response question. I could enter my answer or my question statement here and then choose if I want this to be evaluated as text evaluation or math evaluation. Most often you'll probably want math evaluation. The text evaluation is going to evaluate it exactly as you have the text entered here in the answer box. So let's say you choose math evaluation. You can choose how you want this question to be evaluated. We have multiple options here. Our default is set at expression. And if you're ever curious as to what each of those mean, just click this question mark icon and it explains a little bit more. If we click advanced options here, you can see that you can change the number of decimal places that the answer is accurate to, as well as the answer tolerance. And then down below, you can add in additional answer text boxes. So maybe you're having students enter an X and Y coordinate. They could enter the X coordinate here and the Y coordinate below. You can add in additional answer choices. Again, maybe if there's a common error that students would make, you'd want to enter that as an incorrect answer and then provide some explain error. Open-ended allows your students to answer questions using an open answer text box. So this would not be evaluated by Hawks automatically. This would be something that you would go into the system afterwards, read the student's answer, and then award them points based off of your rubric. So for all of these questions that I just mentioned, you can add in additional steps over here on the left-hand panel. You can also add in tutor options, similar to what we have for all of our Hawks questions already, by clicking Add Tutor Options, where you can add a hint, a fully worked out solution, a general explain error, so not specific, but just general overall, and a step-by-step. You can also find that information up here at the top, upper right, where you can add in your tutor options. All right, so I'm going to pass this over to Chelsea, who's actually going to demonstrate creating a question. And after that, Hallie will actually demonstrate creating a graphing question.
So I am going to focus on the free response as a question type. And as Kristen showed you earlier, there's a lot of different ways to evaluate. So if you want to predefine what sort of inputs or how our evaluation engine will handle your student answers. So for example, if it's ordered pairs, making sure it's in the correct ordered pair format. If it's a set of values, you could put in your answers 2, 3, 4, or the student might put in 3, 2, 4 or 4, 3, 2. So it allows for that sort of variance. Intervals, inequalities, factors. I am actually going to focus on factors today. So the question that I'm going to create is factoring a polynomial. It's also helpful up here to give some specific instructions on how you want the student to input the answer. So for this question, I'm going to instruct them that if they're not able to factor it, then they would indicate that by typing in F. And this is just so that the student is not guessing how they indicate that it's completely factored or it's not factorable any further. And I went ahead to save some time, already created my iteration table, but I'll go over that with you quickly. So Kristen mentioned that you can find the variables up here in the variable manager. And this, as we mentioned, has 50 iterations. So that just means there's 50 versions of the question. and you can actually have up to 702 variables throughout your question, so that will be these columns here. And typically, our best practice at Hawks is to create the iteration table in Excel, and this allows you to algorithmically create the different values you're looking for. You're less likely to make a mistake. You can see all the variables just a little bit more concise than the window size that's available in Question Builder. And we also try to make sure that our questions are all within the same level of difficulty. So I can sort here and figure out, it's an easier glance just to make sure that all of the questions are within a similar level of difficulty. So what I did is I knew that I wanted my answers to be 7 and 3 for this first iteration. So I've labeled those C and D. And therefore, because those are my answers, I generated that my B value in my polynomial of a quadratic type is going to be 10, and the C value would be 21. So I just calculated those using formulas. It's super easy to create it in Excel. You can just copy it. And when you paste it into the variable manager, you'll notice that this is a much smaller iteration table than I need. If I paste it, it will just automatically resize to accept my iteration table. The one caveat with this, though, is that if what I was pasting was smaller than what was available to me, I would need to delete some of those rows and delete the columns, and you can just do that by removing column from the end, remove row from the end. You can also right-click on the columns and or rows, and it will give you the option to remove the rows and the columns. The first time that you create this variable table within the question, you do need to give it a name. I usually just call it var, and I'm going to save it. So now I'm going to put my polynomial here, and you will do that through the expression builder. And as, again, Kristen mentioned, we do use LaTeX for our expression builder. We have some documentation linked here, but also it's very easy to Google if you don't know what you're looking for or you can't find it here. It's very easy to Google those. So my polynomial is going to be of a quadratic type. I've already decided that my first variable here is a, as we mentioned, ax plus, and then I'm just hitting this variable button to insert the variable that I need. And I can hit OK, and it will display there for me. I've already set my evaluation to factors, and, oh, you know what, I'm sorry, I left something out here. This is actually got a degree of 3, because I want my students to factor out the greatest common factor first. That's going to be one of our errors. All right. So now I have this evaluated as factors. I'm going to insert my answer here as a factor, and the GCF for this was X. That's going to go out first. The parentheses are, sorry, it's kind of soft to see. Parentheses here, you'll notice that we have the slash left and the slash right for the open and closing parentheses. That is really helpful for helping the parentheses size appropriately when you're seeing them on the student side. So my answer is always going to be the form X plus C. Insert it there. That's the first factor. And then I'll have X plus D as my second factor. Now, because I've set this as factors, this will also accept if the student had entered X plus D first, or they had entered X in the middle. So any order of these factors would be evaluated as correct. I'm going to add another answer now because I want to guess at what are some common mistakes a student might make when solving this problem, so I can give them some really targeted feedback. An obvious one that comes to me is maybe they've factored out the GCF, but they forgot to include that in their final answer. So I'll set up that answer. Again, that's X plus C and X plus D. So I want to show the explain error here. I'll go over the general explain error in a moment, but the header from that will also populate any explain error you have here, so there's no need to duplicate that. So I'm going to say, it appears you forgot to include the GCF in your answer. Check your work and try again. So for the sake of time, I won't go through other ones, but you can have up to 10 defined answers, a total of correct and incorrect. So you could have 9 explain errors for this case if you wanted. All right, so for the add tutor options, since I already mentioned it, I'm going to go over the general explain error. And typically at Hawks, what we'll do for all of our headers is we want to repeat the question statement. So when the student goes to when they have the explain error appear, they'll remember what the question was. So I'm going to type that again. You were asked to completely factor the given polynomial. Again, I'll go to the expression builder. And then I can create some information or create an error here that would just be a wide net of any possible error they can make. This is for once you've exhausted what you think the common errors your students might make. This will just serve as a catch-all for anything you didn't quite get. So some of those might be maybe the student had an error inputting the answer that you didn't predict, and so you want to make sure you're giving them some sort of feedback. So for this one, I'll just say, you may have made an error finding the GCF, finding the 2 terms that summed to, we're looking for B, so maybe they weren't able to determine the values that added to B, or you did not find the correct factors of A. So it could be one of those 3 things, it could be none of those things, but this will just serve as a reminder to the student about what to look for. One of the other tutor options that you can add is hint or step-by-step, and there is not a reason at this point to create both of those, because from the student side, only one of them will show. And if you have both of those created, it will show the step-by-step. So the step-by-step is going to be an opportunity for you to really break the problem down into small steps and have the student answer tiny portions of the question at a time. So for this, we might say the first step is there a GCF? What is it? Student gets that right, they could go on to the next step. What are some factors of 54 that would sum to 15, for example? That was the value from the first iteration, or you can add a hint. I also want to say that for the explain errors, when the student gets an incorrect answer, they will receive a message, your answer is incorrect, so there's no need to add that here. We probably don't want to expose that to them twice. And then for the solution, again, we would just repeat the question header here, and then you could show all the solution steps of how you arrived at that answer. And so this can really be tailored to what are the important steps that your students are hitting. So here we might explain that we're looking for numbers that add up to that 3rd term in the polynomial that multiply to that middle term. We might want to provide some guidance on whether those values are positive and negative and how that affects our factors, and just the simple steps that we would go through to factor those out. So I won't type all of that out right now, but if you have questions about the law tech that you would use to go through those steps, again, you can Google that or definitely reach out to us and we'll be happy to help you with that. So once I save my question, so it's telling me that I have errors. So I added a solution, but I didn't populate it with anything, so I'm going to go ahead and delete it. And I should be able to save that now. At this point, since it's the first time I'm saving it, this is popping up to remind me to give the question a name and also give it a level of difficulty. So I'll call it factoring polynomials. And it's relatively, well, I'll call it medium because I am having to factor out a common factor. And this is completely subjective. Even at Hawks, it really depends on the context of the lesson or the product or even your students, what all is assigned in that lesson. So this is really more for your reference. I can preview the question. So you'll see here I've got, this is one iteration of the of this question, and this is the correct answer for that iteration, and I've defined one explain error. So if the student forgot to type in the GCF, they'll get that really targeted feedback, and they'll know that that's their mistake, and they can try the problem again. Down at the bottom, we also have new values. So if you kind of want to cycle through what some of those iterations were, just at a quick glance from the instructor side to make sure everything looked the way that you wanted it to look. And then if you clicked the permissions tab, you would also be able to share this question with any of your fellow instructors in the same gradebook. You can give them read permission. So if you want them to be able to assign it to their own test, maybe you don't share a curriculum, any of their assignments, you can give them access here and they can share questions with you. You can give them write permission, so this would allow them to edit the question. If an instructor were to share a question with you that they did not want you to edit, because it was their question, you can always make a copy of the question and it would then give you full ownership of that copy so you can make whatever edits you want. So this also can be a pretty collaborative tool. And I guess I'll pass this off to Hallie now and demo the question, building in Graph Builder.
All right. So Hallie's going to share a little bit about using our Graph Builder tool, which is our most recent update to Question Builder.
Okay, so I will go ahead and just stay within this folder and create a new question. But as Kristen mentioned, we've been working at adding this new functionality called Graph Builder. And right now we have 3 shapes that you can add within it. So I'll go over the shapes and the settings just to give you a broad overview before I dive into an actual question. But right now you can add 3 different kinds of shapes: a point, a line, or a polygon. And to just explain how Graph Builder is used, I guess I should start there. Graph Builder is used to insert static questions into like your question statement. So something that the student would look at to answer the question, like a free response question or multiple choice. You could also include it in your solution or your explain errors to help clarify the point or topic that you are explaining. And then we also have some interactive functionality within it as well. So the shapes that you can add are also draggable. So the student can move them around, maybe see how they interact with other shapes on the graph in order to answer the question. So we have those 3 shapes I mentioned, point, line, and polygon, and then we also have settings that you can define for your graph. So you can change the size of your graph, you can give it a title or summary. You can also specify what those grid lines are. So maybe you want them to display every 5 units instead of every 1. So you can change that. You can change your variables. So if you're doing an application problem, maybe your X variable will become quantity you could change that to a Q. Maybe your vertical variable will become price. You could make that a P, and those will update over here. You can also give them captions. So we could clarify that this is quantity, maybe in thousands, and our price is in dollars. And those will show up along the sides. And we can also change the intervals for our X and Y axis. So in this case, maybe we would want it to go from 0 to 10 and 0 to 10 on each side. So the settings tab, again, is just to decide what you want your actual graph to look like. Let me close out of this just to default back to the original. And then if we get into the shapes now, for a point, you really only have to specify your X and Y coordinates. You can put in actual values here, and these would be static, so they would not change. And then you can add things like whether you want to display the coordinates, a label, change the display style, so maybe you want it to be open, and then you can also make it draggable here. So if I save this, I will have a point at 5, 5, and when this shows up on the student side, they could actually click it and drag it around. And that same functionality exists for lines. There are 4 different types of lines that we can use. I think most commonly you would use a line or an inequality. The difference with inequality, you have your region here, so you could shade above or below the line. And then we have several different ways that you can define your line. So the equation is just your standard form. You need an A, B, and C value to enter. We also have 2 points. So you would just need to enter the information for the 2 points on the line. We have point slope. So again, point and then the slope down here, and then vertical and horizontal lines, and then oblique. And then in addition to line, we have polygons. The way we define a polygon is by the points on the polygon. So maybe you want to enter like a triangle, provide a graph of a triangle. You could pick your coordinates here. Let's say we have -5, 0. Our second point will be maybe 0, 5. And then our third point will be, let's say, 5, 0. So the default is 3 points. If you want to add additional, you can just add this point here and fill it out and press save. I'll press cancel since I want a triangle. And if I press save, we get the graph of the triangle up here. We are working on additional shapes. Point line and polygon is all we have right now, but we should see some additional ones like parabola or polynomials and rationals, logarithms, exponentials, all of that should be coming soon. We also have this graph XML tab here. That is really just the code that generates these graphs. So you should only really need to focus on the shapes and the settings of Graph Builder. So I want to give you an overview of what the kinds of questions you could make with Graph Builder are now. So I'm going to make a question similar to what Chelsea did with some variables, because we can enter variables in there as well. So the question I want to make is, maybe you wanted to provide a graph of some points plotted and have the student define or figure out what those ordered pairs are. So we'll start in the question statement by saying list the set of ordered pairs corresponding to the points on the graph. And because I have ordered pairs here, that means I want my answer to be a free response, and I'm going to evaluate as ordered pairs. And again, if you're unsure, just click this icon here, and it'll say ordered pairs verifies the answer in the form here. So an example would be like 1, 2. So ordered pairs should be good. And then I'm going to center this and then click that graph builder icon again. So all of my points are going to be within the range of -5 and 5. So I'm going to update my axes to go from -5 and 5 on the horizontal and on the vertical axis. And then to help the student, I want my grid lines to display every one, and I want the labels to display every one as well. So I have that label interval I'm going to set to 1 and 1 on the vertical also. So this should just make it easier to see where exactly those points are. So now I'm going to go back to shapes, and I'm going to click point. And I want these points to be variables, so I don't want the same point to be shown to every student. So I'm going to create a variable table just like Chelsea did. I'll also call it var. And then I have a iteration table I created here. So these will be, A and B will represent the X and Y coordinates of my first point, and I plan to add 3 points. So I have 6 columns here. A, C, and E will be the X coordinate of each point, and then the other 3 will be the Y coordinates. So I'm just going to copy that, and then go back here and paste it, and we'll save it. So when I click into the X coordinate, I can then go up here to Variable Manager, make sure I have column A selected, and insert it. And then my Y coordinate will be column B, so I will insert that as well. And then I want a label displayed here so I can reference in the answer which point I'm referring to. So we'll call this label A. And then my position, I'm going to position the label in the top right. And we'll have it saved. You can see it shows up here. We have this variable table below our graph over here, and this lets you just quickly click through all of the iterations to make sure that everything is displaying as you expect it to be. So I have 5 different rows here. I'll click through, and you can just quickly see how point A moves. All right, so I want maybe 2 more points added to this graph. So I'm going to add another point, and my X coordinate will now be C for my second point. So I'll insert that, and D will be my Y coordinate. And I'll give this guy a label of B, and we'll put the label maybe in the top left and save it. You can now see B pop up here. You can click through again if you want to see how they move. And then let's add 1 more point. And we'll give it coordinates E and F. And we'll call this point C. And let's make the label position bottom right and save it. So here are my 3 points that I want my student to find the ordered pairs. Again, we can click through just to make sure that all 3 points are always displayed within those boundaries and they're where you want them. And then we can click OK and insert this into our question statement. So now we want to figure out how we will define our answers. So I want to refer to A, B, and C. So I will put A, B, and C in the prefix here. The first answer, we'll just call it prefix A. And I'm adding it in an expression so that it has the proper formatting. It'll appear as italicized. So here will be point A. I will click the parentheses here, and if you recall, the coordinates for point A were A and B. So I will go back and insert those. And then I want to also require the student to figure out the ordered pairs of the other 2 points. So I'm going to click this add another text box option. I will add the prefix B and do the same thing where the coordinates were C and D in this case. And then last, I want to click and add prefix C. And then my coordinates were E and F. Okay, so I have my answers saved here. In this case, we have 3 answer boxes here, so it'll be important to make sure my answer order is locked. Otherwise, we would not have the labels corresponding to these answers. We could add any variation of these answers in the text boxes. So I'm going to go ahead and save just so we can see what this looks like. This is a good example for PCM2 in chapter 8.1. So I'm just going to label that as a reminder. And I think this is probably low difficulty just because we're figuring out the ordered pairs. And we'll go ahead and save it. And then we can preview it. And you can see that we have our graph here and then our answer order. And then if you want to click new values, you'll again see those different variations that we had defined. And you can also go through and add additional answers. So maybe a common mistake here would be to flip your X and Y values, enter it as Y comma X. You could add that as an example as a specific explain error. And then again, as Chelsea went through, you can add your different tutor options. I'll skip over all of that since she's gone through it. But I want to show you how to actually put this on a web test. Or as part of your curriculum. So once you have your question created, you can go back to your gradebook and you can click the web test. And then you can click this create new option. So when you create your own questions using Question Builder, you want to click the question bank and then the instructor option, and this will take you to all of the folders that you have within Question Builder. So we have our questions were saved in test 1. So I'm going to open that up, and you can see that we have the 2 questions that each of us created. You can click through and see the different values that you had here. You can also choose to show the answer. So anything that you need to make sure it's a question you want to assign to a test. But then if you want to select both of these questions, you can go to select all, add both of them. And then what we want to do now is save it. So we'll save as, we'll call this Test 1 matches our folder name. We'll save that, and then we can click this assign option. I'm just going to change some general settings for the test. Maybe I wanted them to have 2 attempts, and then we'll keep it at the 60-minute test length and save it. And then I'll go to the assign option, and I want to assign it to the section my students are in. In this case, it'll be this section. So we'll just go ahead and click assign. And then now I'll show you what it looks like on the student side. So I have this up already. I had a practice session of just some other graphing examples, so I can go back to that in a second. Wait for my courses to load. and I was in PCM2. So you can see this is actually the test that we had just created. You can go ahead and start it, and then you can go through and answer the questions that we had created. So here's an example. Chelsea's has her polynomial here. You can enter the answer to the factored form, and then here you can just enter the ordered pairs corresponding to these points.
This is great. Well, thank you. There's a whole lot that this tool can do. We just touched on a few of the things that you can do, but like we had mentioned, if you have any specific types of questions that you'd like to build, that you would like any assistance with, please never hesitate to reach out. We're happy to help you build them. We're happy to at least point you in the right direction or give you some more specific training on whatever you're looking for. We use this tool internally to build very simple static questions all the way up through dynamic calculus questions. So the tool can do a lot, and we want you to benefit from using it too. So we hope you can use what you've learned today, and we also hope that you continue to reach out if there's anything further that you'd like to learn about. So if you have any questions that are unanswered, please type those in the chat box. I'll give you guys a couple minutes. I think we're a little bit over on our time, so if you need to go, that's fine. You know how to reach out to us. That's a better way to get in touch. But the chat box is available if you do have any questions that you'd like to get answered right now. Oh, okay. I see one question. Which tutor option would you consider to be the most beneficial for students? What would you guys say? I think the specific explain error.
I think that's good. I also really like the step-by-step because it will break what's maybe a more complex problem down to, instead of making it one big step, we'll take it into the smaller 4 or 5 steps that your students really need to work through.
Definitely. And we hear that from students too, that the step-by-step is their favorite tutor option. The specific explain error, I think, is just really nice because when a student does make an error, it's so helpful to stop them right there and point them in the right direction. When will you have tonic graphing capability?
We have some other graphing functionality that we plan to implement first. The conic graphing we'll get to. It's not on a roadmap estimate right now, but it is something we'll definitely consider in the future.
For sure. Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you all again for your time, and please reach out if anything else comes up.